future of sound. And this title makes sense in two ways. First of all, as Tobias Thon has already talked about, Berlin has been very much the city where a certain future of sound has been generated in the last 20 years. It was the city where the techno movement started, and techno is probably the most innovative music in terms of sound that we have ever seen. And the future of sound is also the company slogan of Native Instruments. And we are a company that very much represents how the special musical environment of Berlin can blossom into something that is also a very successful business. We are now one of the biggest technology companies in Berlin, but of course we started out very small, as a very small software startup. And in this presentation, I want to first tell a bit about how Native Instruments became what it is today, and then explain the whole relationship to the electronic music scene in Berlin. And along the way, I will also talk about how we are involved in Japan, because there's actually also quite some things that I can relate about that. I know that some of you know Native Instruments already, because there are quite some musicians and DJs here in the room. For these people, my presentation has a few very exclusive photos from our private album. And for those who don't know Native Instruments yet, I will start with a short video that will give you a very good impression of the world of Native Instruments as it is today. And we need sound, please. So that's a little overview of what Native Instruments today, and now I want to show you how it all started. It all started in 1995. This is Stefan Schmidt, a hardware engineer and also a free jazz keyboard player who played a lot of concerts in Berlin at that time. And this was his favorite instrument. Some of you might know it. It was actually the most popular synthesizer of its decade, the Yamaha DX7. But Stefan was not entirely satisfied with it, because as a hardware instrument it was very big, very heavy, and also pretty hard to use. And this was the point in time where the first Pentium processors came on the market and computers got much more powerful. So he had the idea of just turning a computer into a synthesizer that could probably do everything that he wanted to do, or even more. And he teamed up with a friend, and who was a software developer. And together they developed this software, which was called Generator. It was the very first modular software synthesizer, and it allowed you to create basically any kind of synthesizer instrument on your computer and play it just like a hardware instrument with many obvious benefits, starting with the size and the price. And this product was a real revolution, and it was extremely well adopted, especially in the electronic music scene and in the techno scene. And it was also an obvious reason to found a company, which was Native Instruments. 2 years later, this was the very first Native Instruments office in Berlin-Mitte. Berlin-Mitte was, after the wall fell, the most vibrant area where the most clubs and bars and artist collectives first took place. 7 people at that time, an ideal spot for a little software startup. And here you can see our CEO Daniel, who joined the company just a year earlier at the NAMM show in California. And actually, at this time already, he created a Japanese distribution for Native Instruments. So products were already available in Japan through a Tokyo-based company called Media. And the person on the right is the first software developer that we hired, and he created a very important instrument that was, I would say, the breakthrough, not just for Native Instruments, but for software instruments in general. This here is a Hammond B3 organ, a very popular instrument in a wide range of genres, also pop and rock music, very classical instrument in a way, but also obviously very big, very expensive. And Native Instruments turned this instrument into a software. And that was extremely successful because it was relevant not just for techno producers, but for basically everyone who produced pop or rock music. And that's what started the whole success of software instruments in itself. And this was not only used by hobby musicians, but also by people like Stevie Wonder, just for obvious reasons of flexibility. And that's when also the first startup boom in Berlin started. And Native Instruments was kind of the darling of the startup scene. You can see the press coverage. It was the first internet boom, and as you might remember, a lot of companies in that regard went bankrupt and disappeared after a while. But Native Instruments actually thrived, and it grew. Here's another picture, still in Mitte. Shortly after that, the company actually moved to Berlin-Kreuzberg. You might know that Berlin-Kreuzberg is like the Berlin area with the highest density of subculture. And at that time, Berlin-Mitte had already become gentrified. Today, it's just full of shopping, basically. And so it was decided that this is not the right area for Native Instruments anymore, and we moved into an area that had just had a bigger musical scene at the time. Also at that time, a very important person joined the company. This is a rather early photo of him, Mate Garlic. He eventually became the CTO, and he was one of the central figures in the electronic music movement of the 90s, primarily as a DJ, but also as a producer and as a music journalist. And he was very passionate about music technology, about creating new ways to perform and generate sound. And with his input, this very important software was developed. This is Tractor, and it was the first professional DJ software. You might remember that at that time, it was the time of the MP3 revolution, where people started having all their music on their computer. And this software was the first one that actually allowed you to DJ with your computer like a professional artist on stage. This is still today the most popular DJ software and also the most widely recognized product from Native Instruments. And even at that time, it already came out in a Japanese version, which I think is a nice fact to mention. So from there on, it just continued, and we did another quite interesting thing. We started our own electronic performance events. This was called Native Lab, and we did it at a very iconic club in Berlin called WMF, which is, of course, no longer around these days. And these Native Lab club events were the first opportunities for musicians to actually use a laptop as an instrument live on stage. This was really innovative, and it was also the opportunity for some very innovative music producers to present themselves to the world using the laptop as an instrument. And the whole thing became so well received that we even brought out our own CD compilation at that time. And just to give you an idea, this is one of the software instruments that was used to create these very specific sounds. It was actually its own genre at that time, which was called glitch techno. And in a way, this whole musical genre was spawned by the software technology behind it. Another important milestone was this software called Guitaric, and this was the first opportunity to record guitars into a computer. It's basically an emulation of tube amplifiers and effects units, and this also really changed the way that people recorded guitars in the studio, replacing conventional products with computer and with software. At the same time, this marked a very important change because it was the first product that we developed together with a hardware. And that was really something that changed the course of the company, because hardware these days is extremely important, and everything we do now is basically a combination of software and hardware. 2 years later, we celebrated the 10th company anniversary, and of course we did it with a big club party at the Watergate Club, which is one of the most prestigious clubs in the world and located right next to our office. So it was naturally for us to celebrate there, and as you can see, the company was very much at home on the dance floor. From then on, everything just grew, the company grew, the team grew, the products grew. As you can see, lots of different instruments for different genres, more and more hardware products, lots of DJ gear. And in 2013, we did another important step that might be interesting for you. We established our own office in Tokyo. And Japan was always a very important market for us. It was always the second or third most important market in terms of revenue for us. And we set up our own team last year, a team of 12 people that look after marketing, sales, and logistics and customer service, not only to accommodate our users and our business partners in Japan, but also because we wanted to be closer to the musical scene in Tokyo and in Japan, which is of course very relevant for us to connect with. And of course, we also made a big club party to celebrate this. It was at Room Club, and we had a lot of top Japanese DJs and also a few top international artists. So, coming to today, Native Instruments has now 5 offices, starting out in Berlin. We have had a Los Angeles office since over 10 years. We are right here in Tokyo. We also have offices in Shenzhen, and just this year we're about to open an office in London. And the idea is obviously that we kind of want to connect the major musical metropolises in the world, because each of these scenes are musically very relevant, and we are in touch with a lot of artists in order to get their feedback, take in their creative impulses, and turn them into technology. And just to give you an idea, in the software instruments category alone, we have now over 70 different products that are used for all kinds of musical genres, so it's well beyond the electronic music sphere. Our biggest success right now is this music production system called Maschine, which was the most widely sold music production system worldwide last year. And in the DJ market, we not only have the most popular DJ software, but we are now the 3rd biggest manufacturer of DJ technology in the whole world, in all the categories, including hardware. And we also made a pretty important debut in the iOS market, which is more and more relevant for music producers. We created an app version of Tractor that was downloaded 6 million times last year and was selected by Apple as App of the Year in many different countries. So that's where we're at right now. These are our CEO Daniel and our CTO Marte today. And what is very important to understand is that only Berlin, with its unique environment, could have possibly made such an amazing success story possible. Because the people that work for Native Instruments, most of them are musicians, are producers themselves. We are very closely connected with the musical scene. We work with artists to talk about ideas, to test out concepts. We also hire people from all over the world to work for us. And in product design, it is very important to get the best possible people. And just to give you an example, I could name probably 3 people alone that we hired from Los Angeles, some top product designers, who were just so disappointed by the electronic music scene in the US because it is heavily regulated, and you could even say terrorized by the American administration. So these people are very eager to come to Berlin, not only to work for us, but also because Berlin has just so many possibilities to express yourself creatively. And when it comes to innovative product design, we need people who think innovatively, and these people are always very unconventional, which means they want to live unconventional lives. They want to express themselves. Berlin is a city that allows for that probably better than any other city, and that is, I think, a big part of the success story of Native Instruments. And just to prove the point, this is a map of Kreuzberg. This is where our main office is located. And these are all the electronic music venues. And as you can see, we are right in the middle of it. This is no coincidence. And what this map doesn't show, if we would zoom out, there would not be much more clubs to see, because most of the remaining clubs in Berlin are actually all in this area. In Tokyo, for the very same reason, we also set up our shop in Harajuku, because we wanted to be close to the artist scene, close to a very creative environment. And we have actually worked with innovative artists and producers in Japan for a long time. And it's something that we are now increasing, now that we are located here. Just to give you an example, a few months ago, we worked with the Oilworks Collective and with their artist called Olive Oil. He's also a big fan of Maschine, and he created these 2 custom faceplates for us, which we gave away to our users through a lottery. So this is just one example where we tap into a creative environment, and it works bidirectionally, because we get impulses from them and we create technology that open up new ways for creative expression. So I think Native Instruments is a really good example of how a major business can come from a creative underground and even stay in touch with the underground and interact with it. This is just a few pictures from our Japanese office again. So for us, Tokyo is a very crucial environment. It was very relieving for us to tap into this musical and artistical world more closely. And we hope very much that the electronic music scene and the cultural scene here in Tokyo can continue to thrive. Because we know from our own experience that this scene gives very important input for not only for the culture, but actually also for the business of the entire city. And this is why we're very grateful that we were invited to this event and make this point. And I thank you very much. ありがとうございました。